Welcome to my fake office. We're going to be talking about office defense situations and preparing to defend yourself from workplace violence or responding during a mass shooter attack or any kind of mass violence that happens in your workplace. Now, the first thing we're going to talk about is staging a defensive firearm. Now, two caveats. First of all, if you carry a defensive firearm on your body and you're going to wear it all day long when you're in your workplace office environment, then you may not need to worry about most of the information in this video. However, you might decide that you want to have an auxiliary defensive firearm mounted somewhere or staged somewhere in your office workplace. You might also be in a situation where you're going to have a communal firearm that is accessible for everyone who's trained and qualified and prepared to use it in a worst case scenario in the office. And that's where some of these tips might help you, even though you personally carry a concealed weapon all the time. So let's talk about also the idea that you may not be staging a firearm at all because you can't have a firearm or you choose not to have a firearm in the workplace, in which case some of the other chapters in this series will definitely be of interest to you, especially the ones on improvised defensive tools. But when it comes to the firearm, let's assume for a second that we're not talking about concealed carry because that's pretty simple. However you carry your gun, that's how you're going to have your gun staged in the office, in the workplace. The first thing I want to talk about is a hardpoint. Now, hardpoint is the term that we use when we talk about mounting a holster to a fixed object. And it can be a hardpoint like a piece of furniture, it could be a wall, it could be a closet, it could be maybe even inside of a vehicle. We would talk about hardpointing. The number one concern that a lot of people have with hardpointing is that generally we're talking about having a separate holster, right? So maybe something like this separate holster that fits the handgun that I'm carrying right now. This is on a G-code, what's called an RTI hanger. There's an RTI module underneath of the desk here, and sometimes it's easier to find than others. But once I get that holster secured in there and set that, lock it in, when I come to work, if I don't want to wear my pistol all day long, but I'm going to be in my office, I don't want to have to maybe draw while seated, which can be harder, right, to remove concealment garments, things like that. If I did get attacked while I was in the chair, I might choose, when I get into my office, to remove the firearm from my holster and insert it into the holster that is hard pointed to my desk. Now, while I'm sitting here doing my work, if I'm having a meeting, if I'm talking with someone, if there's an event where I need my firearm, I simply reach underneath and I have a good grip on the gun, just like drawing from a regular holster. The trigger isn't exposed, it's not floating around in a desk drawer, something like that. Even if I were to take my holster off at this point, right, it's going to be a lot more comfortable to go through the day without that holster inside my waistband. I put this in my bag, put it in a closet, put it in a drawer, put it somewhere else. If I were to put the gun in here and just put it in that drawer, remember, that's an inconsistent access point. So in other words, when I open that drawer, sometimes the gun might be canted this way, sometimes it's canted that way, sometimes the stapler's on top of it, whatever. It's much better to have a dedicated holster spot. Let's say that you knew when you were getting dressed for work that you were going to use a hardpoint holster when you got to your office. Well, with the RTI hanger from G-code, I can have a belt slide holster that accepts the RTI holster, and maybe I have a jacket, maybe I have obviously outerwear, a sweater, something like that. So this is going to be better concealed if I'm really going to do this. When I get to work, take off my jacket, and now I can unlock the RTI holster and not have to worry about actually unholstering the gun itself. I simply remove from the RTI hanger module, from that puck, I come down under here and again find that hard point and lock that in. Once I get that locked in, I now could remove that belt slide, but honestly, it's pretty innocuous. It stays very flush to the body, easy to conceal, and it gives me the opportunity, every time I leave the office, I can very easily, without unholstering the gun, bring the gun and the holster and put it back on my body if I'm going to go to a meeting, use the restroom, go to lunch, and obviously when I leave at the end of the day. Another option when it comes to staging a defensive firearm inside of the office is, of course, going to be to have a quick access safe. Now, I'm a big fan of quick access safes. This is a Life Pod from Vaultec. Obviously, this one's out in the open, right? And it's not secured to anything. Well, first of all, this could be hidden also, and we're going to talk about that in a second. This could also be hard pointed with a cable, or it could even be attached, or a lot of quick access safes obviously can be attached to furniture. So you could actually hard point the quick access safe. And this is going to be an option. Because remember, the gun that's underneath the desk in that holster isn't really responsibly staged in terms of preventing unauthorized access. We generally say that hiding a gun isn't enough. Now, if that's going to be the communal firearm that everybody has access to, you want to make sure that you're preventing the unauthorized, the visitor, the janitor, obviously an attacker in the space. So if you just have a gun in the corner and it's easily accessible, that's not going to be something that can't easily be used against you, can't easily be stolen, things like that. So I prefer the quick access safe, especially if you're going to be leaving the office a lot, leaving the gun unattended. So obviously with quick access safe, I can get into a situation very quickly and easily where I have the firearm ready for use. I can stage extra magazines in there. I can have the gun secured. I could also have the gun secured with a holster in there, which is going to make it very easy to put the holster on. Or I could stage a holster nearby so that if I needed to leave the office, or I'm going to move, or I'm going to be checking on a friend of mine, or I'm going to move to another barricade area, I can get to the gun, either have the holster in there or have a holster that's very easy to put on quickly, like this paddle holster, staged nearby. And then once again, we talk about having that potentially hidden. When it comes to staging a defensive tool, another option that you're going to have in terms of like off-body carry is going to be a bag or a backpack. Obviously, there's a lot of bags. This one's from Mission First Tactical, designed with compartments specifically to have a holstered firearm in them. And this may be the most comfortable, most convenient way for you to have a firearm in the workplace, because obviously you can show up to work carrying the bag, take the bag off, it's in your office. You know there's a firearm in there, maybe nobody else does. Once again, we want to be really careful about the idea that just merely hiding a gun isn't preventing unauthorized access at the highest level, or even I think the best practice level of responsibility. So if you were to have the firearm in a bag in your office, you'd want to lock your office when you leave. Notice also that we do have a lock on this cabinet. So if I were to keep that Vaultec quick access safe out in the open when I'm in the office, when I leave the office, I could simply put it in here and take this key with me. So that is an added level of access prevention, which is going to be really important whenever we talk about staging a defensive firearm in any public space, but particularly in an office where you're generally open, you're bringing people in and out, you're having meetings, and even coworkers who may not be trained with the firearm or familiar with firearm safety rules may have access to it, the box. Hide the box, secure the box.